Everyone at the wedding thought I was there to celebrate. My sister Chloe looked beautiful in her white dress, and my former boyfriend Alex stood beside her, looking handsome in his black tuxedo. The room was full of smiling people, flashing cameras, and the sound of champagne glasses clinking. But only Alex knew the real reason I was there. He was the only one who knew what had happened at that clinic in Switzerland. He was the only one who knew why his hands were shaking a little when I gave them their wedding present. It was just a normal-looking envelope, but inside was everything. Every detail, every piece of evidence, every truth about what they had done to me. I had always known I was the less perfect twin. Chloe was the one who sparkled, always wearing designer clothes and being the center of attention. I, on the other hand, was more simple. I remember wearing the same black dress to 3 different art gallery openings. For our 25th birthday, her cake was bigger and had more candles. Mine was smaller, a quiet reminder to everyone that even though we were twins, we were treated differently. "Make a wish, Maya," my mother had said, but her smile didn't seem real. What was there to wish for? That my father, a successful real estate developer, would one day care about my work as a museum curator, as much as he cared about Chloe's modeling career? That my mother would stop suggesting I get plastic surgery to look more like my sister? I closed my eyes and blew out the candles. "She better not tell or it won't come true," Chloe said with a big, perfect smile. Our father, already holding a fresh glass of champagne, raised it and said, "If your sister's new magazine cover comes out next week, I'd wish for some of that family business sense to finally show up in you." Everyone laughed. They were all Chloe's friends and our parents' business partners. None of my friends or colleagues from the museum were invited. That was just how my family was. Chloe was the star, and I was just in the background. Everything changed when I met Alex Ryder. It was about 3 weeks after my birthday, at a benefit event at the Guggenheim Museum. I was in charge of the art auction, watching guests walk around with their champagne. Alex came up to me, but not to flatter me. He asked a question about the restoration of a Caravaggio painting. "The person who restored it managed to keep the original artist's style without damaging the painting," he said. I was surprised. Most wealthy men I met just wanted to talk about their boats. He was tall, with smart-looking eyes behind his glasses. He didn't use any fake charm or shallow compliments. "You actually care about the art," I said, a bit suspiciously. Alex smiled a slow, real smile. "I do," he said. "But I also have to admit I recognized your name on the program. Your family is very well known." "You mean my sister is well known?" I corrected him. "No," he said calmly. "I meant you. Your paper on the ethics of Renaissance art restoration was brilliant. We used it when we were designing our software for preserving art digitally. For the first time in my life, someone saw me for me, not as Chloe's sister or as a member of my family, and it felt amazing." Over the next month, we met for coffee 4 times and had dinner twice. We talked about art history, laughed about his attempts to learn how to paint in college, and even argued about the best ways to preserve modern art. He never mentioned my sister, my family, or their business. When he kissed me on a rainy evening outside the Met Museum, I felt like I was finally my own person, not just living in Chloe's shadow. But then, the next Sunday, my father got a call from Alex. "Alex Ryder called today," Chloe announced at dinner, cutting into her steak. "He's interested in some of our properties downtown." My father's face lit up in a way it never did when I talked about my work. "Expanding his company's presence in New York could be very good for us," he said. Chloe smiled a sweet smile. "He also invited me to the mayor's charity ball next weekend." The room went silent. My fork stopped in midair. "That's impossible," I said. "Alex and I have been seeing each other for weeks." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother dropped her fork. My father's eyes got narrow. "Maya," my mother said gently, "are you sure you didn't misunderstand? Men like Alex usually prefer someone like Chloe. Maybe he was just being nice." Chloe reached across the table and touched my hand, her voice soft and sounding rehearsed. "You've always been a bit intense about these things." Later that night, I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to make some tea. As I walked past my father's office, I heard voices and stopped. "My daughter needs to be more refined," my father was saying. These emotional outbursts, her obsession with art, it's embarrassing. What exactly are you suggesting? Alex asked. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was on edge. There's a place in Switzerland, my father said. It's very private and very effective. They specialize in fixing difficult personalities. And if I agree? Alex asked. He sounded calm, too calm. I will support the merger, my father said, and you can marry whichever daughter you want. I stepped back, the feeling of betrayal burning inside me. The next morning, I found Alex waiting for me in the garden. He had sent me a message saying he wanted to explain. How much is he paying you to get rid of me? I demanded. Alex looked at me calmly. It's not what you think, Maya. This is for your own good. Please trust me. I didn't feel the needle at first, just his hand on my shoulder, holding me steady as I heard footsteps coming up behind me. My last thought before everything went dark was that his eyes didn't change, not even as I fell to the ground. I woke up to the sound of an engine and the smell of leather. My head was pounding. Through the window, I could see snow-covered mountains under a clear blue sky. It would have been beautiful if I hadn't been drugged and taken across the country like a piece of luggage. She's awake, a woman's voice said. A man in a white coat leaned over me. Miss, he said, I am Dr. Evans. We'll be at the institute soon. The confusion will pass. Where am I whispered. My voice sounded strange, far away, like it belonged to someone else. Switzerland, a calm voice said. The Alpine Institute for Behavioral Refinement. Your father has enrolled you in our exclusive wellness program. A wellness program. The words would have been funny if my wrists weren't gently strapped to the armrests of the chair. As the car turned, I saw the institute. It was a modern building made of glass and steel, nestled in the mountains. It looked like a spaceship that had landed in a postcard, clean and out of place. It was a modern, exclusive prison. Dr. Evans smiled as he watched me look at it. Impressive, isn't it? We only take 16 patients at a time. It's the most elite facility of its kind. I don't need treatment, I managed to say, trying to clear the fog from my mind. Everyone says that at first, the woman said, tapping on a tablet. Your evaluation shows anxiety, emotional problems, obsessive behaviors, and delusional attachments. We are here to help you become your best self. Those words, my best self, echoed in my head as they led me through glass doors that opened with a soft whoosh. The reception area looked like a fancy hotel, but with retinal scanners and staff wearing earpieces. A tall, silver-haired man walked up to us. He looked like someone who was used to breaking people in order to fix them. Miss, he said, shaking my hand with a firm, cold grip. I am Dr. Klein, the director of the institute. His accent was slightly German, and his voice was precise. We specialize in emotional restructuring and personality optimization for people like you. You mean kidnapping and brainwashing, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He smiled as if I'd said something cute. Your father mentioned you were spirited. We'll help you use that energy in more productive ways. You'll thank us eventually. Dr. Klein led me down spotless hallways to a private room. It could have been beautiful, but there were small details that gave it away. No sharp corners, windows that didn't open, and a bathroom door that couldn't be locked. Your personal things will be returned when it's appropriate, Dr. Evans said, taking my phone, my watch, and even my hair clip. Dinner is at 6 o'clock. Tomorrow, we'll start your personalized treatment plan. Then they left me alone in my tasteful prison cell. I learned quickly that treatment was a flexible word. Every morning began with medication, a small paper cup of pills that made me feel compliant and slow. If I refused to take them, they would increase the dose and give it to me as an injection. Then I would be sent to a quiet room until I was ready to cooperate. The Institute's methods were subtle but constant. Dr. Klein often talked about what he called identity refinement, which meant carefully removing behaviors and traits that the people paying for our stay didn't like. Your artistic nature is admirable, he said during one of our sessions, looking through my file. But it has shown itself in ways that are not practical. We will help you redirect that creativity toward more fitting, feminine interests. Fitting according to who? I asked, though the words came out slowly. Your father sees your sister as a strong example, he replied. Chloe has used her sense of beauty to build a successful modeling career and has made friends in the right social circles. Every day also included adjustment therapy, which involved watching videos of how to behave properly in polite society, mixed with videos of my own so-called failures. This was paired with small doses of discomfort. The more I resisted, the more unpleasant the sessions became. This isn't therapy, I told them after one particularly difficult session. It is the restructuring of unhealthy patterns, Dr. Evans replied. You will feel much better once you stop fighting. By the third week, I had learned to say what they wanted to hear. On the outside, I was cooperative, but on the inside, I held on to the last pieces of who I was. That was when I met Sarah. She sat next to me during group therapy. She had blonde hair cut in a perfect bob and wore designer clothes that looked too big on her thin frame. When the therapist stepped out to take a call, she slipped a folded note into my hand. It said, "Don't trust anyone. They are watching everything." Her name was Sarah, and I later learned she was the daughter of a tech billionaire. She had been sent to the institute after a scandal involving her environmental protests against her father's company. 9 months, she whispered to me during our supervised exercise time. That's how long I've been here. They don't let you go until they decide you're fixed. My father can't keep me here forever, I said, with more hope than I felt. Sarah let out a soft, bitter laugh. Mine said the same thing. Now he visits once a month, frowns at my progress report, and leaves. The longer you stay, she added, the more they convince your family that you're broken. That night, Sarah taught me how to hide pills under my tongue, how to walk through the hallways without being seen by the cameras, and how to act compliant while secretly keeping a part of myself safe. We need to find our files, she said, to understand what they're really doing to us. 3 nights later, during a staff shift change, we snuck into the administrative wing. Sarah knew a trick to disable one of the hallway cameras. My hands were shaking as I typed my name into the computer. Maya. And then I saw it. There were payment records from my father and more expected payments from Alex Ryder. My breath caught in my throat. There was a full treatment plan under my name created without my consent. And even worse, there were Dr. Klein's private notes. Subject is resistant to behavioral adjustment. High intelligence makes standard methods difficult. Recommendation: increase medication dosage and begin phase 2. Expected outcome: complete emotional restructuring to match the client's preferences within 6 to 8 months. What's phase 2? I whispered, the room starting to spin. Sarah's face went pale. That's when they erase you completely. I looked at her confused. How do you know? Her eyes met mine and they were empty and full of pain. Because I've lived through it. The girl I used to be is gone. And now they're trying to erase what's left of this version of me too, the parts they still can't control. As we walked along the narrow garden path, she lowered her voice and smiled blankly for the surveillance cameras. The perfect patient gets the least amount of supervision, she whispered. That's how we get out. After learning that Alex was involved in sending me here, I became the Institute's best patient. I smiled through therapy, volunteered for extra refinement procedures, and thanked Dr. Klein for his help. Every polite nod and moment of submission wasn't me giving up. It was a strategy. I was saving my energy for the real fight. Your progress is remarkable, Dr. Evans said during my 6th week evaluation. The emotional outbursts have completely stopped, she added, writing in her file. I see now that my behavior was inappropriate, I replied, using the exact tone of gratitude and shame they had taught me to use. My sister has always been the better example, I added quietly. Dr. Evans nodded. Your father will be pleased to hear that. Behind my calm face, I was watching everything. I memorized the guards' schedules, noted access codes, and collected small items. A paperclip from art therapy, a pen refill from the visitor's desk, a maintenance worker's key card that I found during my time in the garden. At night, I wrote in a journal that I had hidden under my mattress. I used my own code, using terms from art conservation to create a secret language. To anyone else, It would look like notes about restoring paintings, but the truth was hidden between the lines. I documented every bit of abuse, every manipulation, and every name. Between writing in my journal, I thought about Alex. I wondered how much of our connection had been real. He had known about my dissertation. He had asked about my thoughts, not just my family. He had held my hand at the Guggenheim as we stood in front of a Rothko painting. He said he would like it. He had listened, really listened, when I talked about the ethics of art restoration. One night, he had talked about his own family. "Sometimes I wonder who I would be without my family's name," he had said as rain tapped against the window. Had he wondered the same thing about me? Or was I just another business deal from the start? Even as I planned my escape with Sarah, these questions stayed with me. Sarah had taught me who to watch, which staff members forgot to lock doors, who ignored certain cameras, and which night guard took long bathroom breaks. "We'll need money," she had said, showing me the small bills she had collected from visitors' forgotten coats and unattended staff wallets. She had also gathered warm clothes. "The mountains are cold," she warned. We picked a date 3 weeks away, a night when there would be fewer staff and a shift change that would give us a head start. We practiced our plan over and over. Then, one day, Sarah was gone. "Miss has been transferred to our specialized care facility in Geneva," the therapist announced during group therapy. "Her treatment requires more intensive care than we can offer here." The other patients nodded without question, their once bright eyes now dull and obedient. That night, I snuck out during the shift change and searched Sarah's room. It was completely clean. There was no trace of her, no sign she had ever been there, except for 3 tiny drops of dried blood behind the door. They were almost invisible unless you were looking for them, unless you already suspected the worst. 2 days later, I overheard Dr. Klein talking to the medical director in the hallway. "The Evans girl was a problem from the beginning," Dr. Klein said, his voice low but steady. "Her father knew the risks of the advanced protocols. Cardiac arrest during electroconvulsive therapy is rare, but it happens. The official report will say she was transferred to intensive care and then had complications," the medical director replied. "Make sure all the records match the official story," Dr. Klein instructed. "We can't afford another incident." I stood frozen. They had killed Sarah. They were covering it up. How many others had disappeared in the same way? That night, I changed the plan. Sarah was gone, but her death would not be for nothing. I would escape not just for myself, but to tell the world what was happening behind those glass walls. I laid out everything I had: the stolen key card, a maintenance worker's old jacket, 300 euros in small bills, a hand-drawn map of the facility, and my coded journal. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman who had arrived at the institute, soft and trusting, was gone. In her place was someone new. Her eyes were sharp and her jaw was set. "They tried to erase me," I whispered to my reflection. "Instead, they created someone else, someone they should be afraid of." The escape had to happen that night. I had seen Dr. Klein that morning, looking at my file. His pen moved next to the words, "Ready for advanced integration." At 2:17 a.m., I made my move. I slipped out of my room during the 3-minute gap between surveillance camera sweeps, a window Sarah had discovered after weeks of careful observation. Wearing the maintenance jacket pulled low over my face, I walked quickly through the east corridor, trying to look like a calm and steady staff member. My first goal was the records room. If I was going to expose this place, I needed proof. The stolen keycard worked. The light on the reader turned green, and the door to the administrative wing opened. Inside, I worked quickly. I put the flash drive I had taken from the computer lab into the computer and downloaded my entire file. Then, I opened the filing cabinet and took out Sarah's physical records. That was when the alarms went off. Red emergency lights flashed, and a calm, cold, mechanical voice echoed through the hallways. "Security breach, East Wing. All personnel, implement containment protocol." There was no more time to be careful. I started running, racing toward the exit Sarah had marked on the blueprints. Behind me, I could hear the sound of boots on the polished floor getting louder. Ahead of me, beyond one last door, was freedom. I burst through the exit, and the freezing night air hit me. The snow crunched under my thin slippers. Sirens wailed behind me, and dogs barked in the distance. Flashlights cut through the dark, but I didn't stop. I kept running, disappearing into the forest without looking back. 8 months later, I was in Paris. The gold leaf on the old Baroque frame of a 19th century painting was flaking off. Under the bright light of a magnifying lamp, my hand moved carefully, applying a special adhesive. In that moment, the world shrank to just this one small, fragile point of damaged beauty being patiently repaired. Elizabeth, your attention to detail is amazing, Miss Umont said, leaning over my shoulder in the small art studio in Paris. The family will be very pleased. Thank you, I replied, my French now smooth after months of practice. The original artist deserves careful and respectful work. I glanced at a glass cabinet across the room and saw my reflection. My dark hair was shorter now, with a streak of white. My face was thinner, and my eyes looked older than my 26 years. Elizabeth Gray, an art restorer and forgery expert, didn't look anything like Maya, the missing American heiress who had once been all over the news. Back in the United States, my disappearance had been a brief story. Twin Fleas Treatment Center, the headlines had said, until more exciting news pushed my story aside. Chloe's engagement to Alex had quickly become the new hot gossip. Their wedding and the merger between Alex's company and my father's was being called the society event of the year. My escape had left its marks. 2 of my toes still had frostbite, and a sharp scar crossed my left shoulder from a tangle of barbed wire. But it was the invisible wounds that stayed with me. Nightmares of endless white hallways, the beeping of medical monitors, and the sudden panic I felt whenever someone stood too close behind me. That's enough for today, Miss Umont said gently, looking at her watch. You don't want to be late for your appointment. I nodded and carefully covered the painting. 3 afternoons a week, I left the studio early to see Dr. Lem, a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma. My official story was that I was a Canadian living abroad, recovering from an accident. But Dr. Lem had earned enough of my trust to hear parts of the truth. It was a 20-minute walk to her office. I used that time to practice the grounding exercises she had taught me. Notice 5 ordinary things, breathe through the panic, and learn to tell the difference between real danger and old fear. You're making excellent progress, Dr. Lem said, after I told her about riding the crowded subway during rush hour. A few months ago, the tight space and noise would have given me a panic attack. The nightmares aren't as frequent now, I told her, but I still can't stand being touched unless I'm expecting it. She nodded, her silver-framed glasses reflecting the afternoon light. The body remembers trauma, even when the mind starts to heal. Your nervous system is still trying to protect you. I need to be stronger, I said quietly. If I'm going to... Going to what, Elizabeth? She asked, using the fake name she knew wasn't mine. I hesitated. We had never talked about my future plans. The evidence I had taken from the Institute was still locked in a safe deposit box. My current identity, which I had created with cash and vague documents, was designed to keep me hidden. Going to move forward, I said finally. Dr. Lem didn't say anything, but her eyes seemed to understand. After my session, I stopped at a small cafe for an espresso. I put my tablet on the table and opened a private browser. Elizabeth Gray had no social media, but the old habit of checking up on things was still there. I typed in the names. Chloe wedding Alex Ryder. Dozens of results popped up. Their engagement party had been featured in the society pages. Alex's company's stock had gone up 12% after the merger was announced. The wedding was scheduled for June, just 3 months away at my family's estate. I closed the browser quickly as the waiter came over. Pardon, mademoiselle, he said politely. A letter arrived for you. He held out a small silver tray with a cream-colored envelope on it. My breath caught in my throat. No one should know me by this name. The envelope had no return address, just my fake name, written in elegant handwriting. I took it slowly, my fingers trembling, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Back in my apartment, a small but sunny 5th-floor walk-up, I held the envelope in my shaking hands. My fingers were barely steady enough to open it. Inside was a thick, elegant card with gold trim. The words shimmered in the afternoon light. Mr. and Mrs. request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Chloe to Mr. Alex Ryder. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. I stared at the broken pieces and the dark stains spreading across the tiles. How had they found me? Who even knew I was here? A smaller slip of paper fell out from behind the invitation. It was a note written in familiar handwriting. Maya, I respected your wish to disappear, but there are things you don't know, things I need to explain. Please come home. Not for them, for the truth. I sank to the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and the bitter smell of spilled coffee. Alex had found me. After everything, the betrayal, the institute, the escape, he had still managed to find me. What hurt the most wasn't the fear, it was the shameful little flutter in my chest when I saw his handwriting. That night, I made 2 phone calls. First, to a man I knew who was an expert at creating new identities, just in case. Then, I called Dr. Lem's emergency number. I need to learn how to face the people who hurt me, I said quietly when she answered. I'm going home. My family's estate looked exactly the same. The gardens were perfectly manicured, and the large, unnecessary fountain in the courtyard was still bubbling. But it all seemed smaller now, less intimidating than it was in my memories. I adjusted my sunglasses and straightened the sleeves of my tailored blazer. Elizabeth Gray, the humble art restorer, had stayed in Paris. Today, I was Maya again, a wealthy daughter, despite everything they had done. The taxi driver carried my small suitcase. Want me to wait, miss? He asked. Big houses like this make me nervous. I almost said yes, but instead I handed him a large tip. That won't be necessary, I replied. This is home. The word felt strange in my mouth, sharp and metallic, like the taste of blood. The front door opened before I could reach for the bell. Our longtime butler stood there, his usual neutral expression slipping just a little in surprise. Miss Maya, we weren't expecting you. Clearly, I said, stepping inside. The marble foyer was cold and familiar. I had seen this room too many times in my nightmares. Are my parents home? They're in the garden, miss. There's a wedding luncheon with the planners. Of course there was. I left my suitcase in the hallway and walked through the house, repeating Dr. Lem's grounding advice in my head. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear. Through the open French doors, I saw them. White roses in crystal vases, champagne glasses sparkling in the sun. My mother was at the center of it all, directing a team of vendors. Chloe was beside her, pointing at something in a binder. My father was talking to Alex near the terrace. Alex saw me first. The glass in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. My father followed his gaze and turned. He froze. Maya? My mother's voice was thin and sharp. I smiled and took off my sunglasses slowly. Hello, Mother. I got the invitation. The wedding planner glanced between us, looking uncomfortable. I wondered what story they had been told about the missing twin. Why don't we give the family some privacy? The planner said, gathering the other vendors. Once they were gone, my mother stepped forward, her face a mix of emotions. Darling, we had no idea. Your treatment facility said you checked yourself out. We've been so worried. How kind of you to send someone to look for me, I said, my voice calm. Oh, wait, you didn't. Maya, my father began, his voice sharp with a warning I knew all too well. This is hardly the time for... For what? The truth? A conversation about how you sent your daughter to be tortured and called it therapy? Chloe's perfect posture shifted. You always were dramatic. The Alpine Institute is one of the most respected facilities in Europe. You would know, I said, looking her in the eye. You helped pick it out. My mother fidgeted with her pearls. You were struggling, Maya. We only wanted what was best for you. Save it, I said, turning to Alex, who still hadn't taken his eyes off me. Hello, Alex. He said my name quietly with an intensity that almost made me falter. Maya, just my name. Congratulations on the engagement, I said, motioning toward Chloe. And the merger. I heard your stock went up. Was it 15%? 12, he answered automatically, then winced as if he realized how that sounded. A heavy silence fell. Well, my mother said too brightly, this calls for a celebration. Maya is home. Richardson, please prepare the blue guest room. My old room will be fine, I said. Oh, but sweetheart, she replied with a fake apologetic smile. We've turned it into a bridal suite for Chloe. The blue room is more comfortable now. Of course they had. They had erased me from the house, just as they had tried to erase me from memory. Lovely, I said with a tight smile. The blue room will be perfect. Dinner that night was as painful as I had expected. My mother talked about flower arrangements. My father asked nosy questions about my job, and Chloe watched me like I was a wild animal she was afraid of. Alex said very little, but his eyes never left me. When I told him about my art restoration work in Paris, my father frowned. Art restoration? That hardly seems worth the education we paid for. I find broken, beautiful things and make them whole again, I said calmly, cutting my steak with slow, deliberate movements. The metaphor speaks to me. My mother, always careful with her words, asked gently, And will you be returning to Paris after the wedding? I smiled politely. That depends on how things go here. Chloe put her fork down with a sharp clink. What exactly does that mean? It means, I replied, turning to her with a calm expression I had perfected at the Institute, that I'm looking forward to being a part of your special day. After all, what kind of sister would miss her twin's wedding? Later, in the soft blue guest room, I unpacked my few belongings. The original evidence from the Institute was still safe in Paris, but I had brought copies of the most important documents, just in case. A gentle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. When I opened it, Alex was standing in the hallway, his hands in his pockets. May I come in? He asked quietly. Not a good idea, I said. Maya? Alex said softly, almost pleadingly. What happened to you there? You seem so different. I studied him closely. This was the man I had once thought I loved. The man who had stood by while I was locked away. He looked thinner now, with dark circles under his eyes. What happened? I repeated slowly, my voice even and low. Exactly what you paid for, Alex. Aren't you pleased with the result? At the florist shop the next day, I adjusted a bouquet of white lilies. The lilies should complement the roses, I said gently, not overpower them. The florist looked surprised. My sister, I added, likes to be the center of attention, even when it comes to flowers. 2 weeks into my return, I had made myself the helpful twin. I volunteered for every wedding task, offering to help with guest lists, vendor contracts, and even security arrangements. I quietly stored every piece of information, building a detailed plan. Maya, darling, you've been such a help, my mother said one afternoon, clearly relieved that I hadn't caused any trouble. I was worried you might feel awkward about the situation. Water under the bridge, I replied with a calm smile. Family comes first. This new, agreeable version of me made them uneasy, especially Chloe. Every time I cheerfully offered to handle another wedding detail, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes before she quickly hid it. You've changed, she said one morning as we were looking over table arrangements. The Institute must have worked wonders. I met her gaze. It certainly changed me forever. At night, when the house was quiet, I focused on my real purpose. The wedding was the perfect cover for my investigation into the connections between Alex's company, my father's company, and the Alpine Institute. My first real lead came during a dinner with Alex's parents. His father, the original founder of the company, started talking about their latest innovation. Our behavioral prediction algorithms can anticipate what consumers will do with 87% accuracy, he boasted. That sounds fascinating, I murmured. Does it apply to individuals or only to large groups? Both, Alex answered, his eyes on me. Although individual predictions require more detailed data. Like medical records? I asked lightly. There was a moment of silence. Then Alex's father cleared his throat. Among other things, he said. That night, I snuck into my father's home office. His password was still the same, Chloe's birthday. In his email, I found everything I needed. There were messages between my father's company Alex's company, and a third party called the Behavioral Modification Research Group. The subject line read, Partnership Opportunity, Advanced Human Prediction Models. The emails confirmed my worst fears. The Alpine Institute wasn't a treatment center. It was a research lab. The patients weren't receiving therapy, they were test subjects. Their emotional and psychological responses were being used to improve predictive algorithms for Alex's company. My next step was to contact Maya Desai, an investigative journalist I had connected with through secure channels in Paris. We met at a small cafe near my family's estate. These documents prove they were experimenting on people without their consent, Maya said, looking through the pages I had given her. With your testimony and the medical records you smuggled out, this is more than enough for a story. Will you publish it? Yes, she said, looking up from her tablet. But not yet. I need to verify everything with other sources, former staff, other patients. Give me 2 weeks. The wedding is in 10 days, I said. I need you to be there with a photographer. Maya raised an eyebrow. Planning something dramatic? Justice, I said softly, often comes with a performance. The next afternoon, I was alone with Alex in the estate library. He was reviewing contracts while I pretended to read a book. I waited. Finally, he spoke. You haven't asked why, he said, putting his papers aside. Why I helped imprison you. Why I'm marrying your sister, knowing what she did. I didn't look up. I assumed you would tell me. Alex sighed. I didn't know how bad it was. The institute was presented as a high-end wellness retreat. Your father told me you were unstable, that you needed help. He said that if I didn't cooperate, he would block our company merger and destroy my business. He ran a hand through his hair. By the time I found out what was really happening, you had already escaped. How convenient for your conscience, I said quietly. I've been trying to make it right, Alex said. I hired investigators. I've been gathering evidence. I want to expose your father. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. While planning to marry his favorite daughter. The engagement is a strategy, he replied. Once I have a controlling interest in his company. I can still stop this, I said quietly. Alex shook his head. You're marrying Chloe in 10 days, I reminded him. Whatever you're planning, you've made your choice. His expression darkened. Have you seen yourself lately, Maya? He asked. The coldness, the control. They didn't just hurt you at that place, they turned you into someone else. The truth in his words stung more than I wanted to admit. Maybe, I replied. But unlike you, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. As the wedding got closer, I kept up my act as the perfect, helpful sister. I went with Chloe to her final dress fitting and gave her thoughtful compliments. I reviewed the catering menu with our mother and even suggested serving Alex's favorite wine. 3 days before the wedding, I was alone in the garden when Alex found me. I miss who you used to be, he said softly. The real Maya, the one who got excited about obscure art restoration and laughed without worrying about who might be listening. I turned to look at him, and for just a moment, I let my guard down. Funny, I said. I spent 2 years being told that person had to be erased. Alex stepped closer. Not by me, he said. Never by me. For a moment, I remembered why I had once loved him, but then I remembered his signature on the Institute's payment records. Your rehearsal dinner is tomorrow, I said, stepping back. Make sure your speech is ready. That night, I went over my preparations one last time. All the evidence was gathered, and key witnesses were confirmed. Maya had her press credentials. Everything was in place. Standing by my window, I watched as Chloe and Alex arrived for the dinner. I gently touched the small scar at my temple, a reminder of what I had endured. Tomorrow would be the rehearsal, and in 3 days, the wedding. Then, justice. The morning of the wedding was perfect. The sky was clear, there was a soft breeze, and the temperature was mild, just as my mother had hoped for. Even nature seemed to want to give Chloe her perfect day. I stood by my bedroom window, watching the garden being transformed. Rows of white chairs stood in neat lines, a tall floral arch marked the altar, and chandeliers hung from the old oak trees. It looked like a wedding from a luxury magazine, which was exactly what Chloe had arranged with exclusive coverage in Vogue. There was a knock at my door. Miss Maya, Helen, the housekeeper said gently, "Your hairstylist is ready." "Thank you, Helen," I smiled. "I'll be right there." The bridal suite, which used to be our mother's sitting room, was full of people: makeup artists, photographers, wedding planners, and bridesmaids. Chloe sat in the center of it all, calm and glowing. When I walked in, the chatter quieted for a moment. "There you are," Chloe said, her voice smooth and warm. I was beginning to wonder. I took my place in the chair next to her. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, smiling. Our mother hovered nearby, adjusting Chloe's veil and constantly checking her watch. "The Prestons are greeting guests. Richard is with the officiant. Everything is falling into place." "It's all perfect," I told her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Exactly as you planned." The stylist worked on my hair, creating an elegant updo that looked nice but not distracting. While she worked, I went over the day's schedule in my head. Ceremony at 4 o'clock, reception to follow, dinner at 7 o'clock. My moment would come at 8:15 during the toasts. At 3:30, we gathered at the garden pavilion. Chloe looked stunning in her custom Vera Wang gown. She wore a careful smile that hid the sharpness underneath. My father joined us, looking proud in his tuxedo. He took Chloe's arm. "You look beautiful too, Maya," he said. It was so rare for him to say something like that. I almost laughed. "Thank you, Father," I replied simply. The wedding coordinator called the bridesmaids to line up. Because Chloe and I were twins, I would walk down the aisle alone, just before her. From the corner of my eye, I saw Maya Desai among the photographers, giving me a small nod. The string quartet began to play. One by one, the bridesmaids walked down the aisle. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, walking slowly past the rows of elegant guests. I felt strangely calm. The Institute had taught me how to separate my feelings from my actions, how to stay in control. Every eye was on me, the Blackwood twin who had once been whispered about, now back in the spotlight. I reached the altar and took my place across from Alex. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his face was tense. When our eyes met, I saw something pass between us. Regret, maybe, or longing. I looked away first. Then Chloe appeared, walking proudly on our father's arm. The ceremony went exactly as planned. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed on fingers, and the officiant declared them husband and wife. Alex kissed Chloe with just the right amount of passion, and the crowd clapped. The reception began soon after. Guests moved into the decorated dining area, laughing and drinking champagne. Everything on the surface was perfect, just as Chloe wanted and just as I needed. The couple had their first dance, and everyone watched with approval. At 8:10, the wedding coordinator signaled for attention. It was time for the toasts. Alex's father spoke first, welcoming Chloe to the family with a polished, businesslike speech. My mother followed, dabbing at fake tears as she praised Chloe's charm. Then, the coordinator's voice carried across the room, and now, a special blessing from the bride's twin sister, Maya. The conversations hushed. I stood up slowly, holding my champagne flute. Every eye turned to me, some curious, others cautious. They were waiting to see what the troubled twin would do. Chloe's smile twitched slightly. "For those of you who don't know me," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I am Chloe's twin sister. We shared a womb, but as you can see, we took rather different paths in life." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "I've been away for some time," I continued, "abroad. My family called it treatment, and it was quite an experience. I learned a lot about human nature, about what people are capable of doing to each other, all in the name of ambition." The laughter died down. My father shifted in his seat. Alex stared at me, unmoving. "Today we're here to celebrate transformation," I said, lifting my glass slightly. "Chloe transforming from a model to a corporate wife. Alex from a tech pioneer to a family man. And me." I smiled as I met Chloe's increasingly tense gaze. "Well, I've gone through a transformation of my own." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope, the same kind used for the wedding invitations. I placed it gently in front of the couple. "My gift to the happy couple," I said softly. a token of what I've learned about loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get difficult. Alex opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper listing its contents. Medical records, payment transactions, and testimony from former staff members of the Alpine Institute. Testimony that exposed the illegal human experiments conducted there. Chloe's voice cracked as she asked, "What is this?" "The truth," I said, looking her in the eye. "The truth about the Alpine Institute, about what happened to me, about who allowed it, who funded it, and who made money from it." Alex's face turned pale as he read the list. My father started to get up, but my mother grabbed his arm. Camera flashes popped across the room. Maya Desai, always prepared, stepped forward, holding out her recorder discreetly. "To new beginnings," I said, raising my glass one last time. "And to justice, long overdue." Alex suddenly stood up, the champagne forgotten in his hand. Tears were running down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "God, Maya, I'm so sorry." In the days that followed, the story exploded. Maya Desai's exposé was on the front page of the New York Times 2 days after the wedding. Tech dynasty and real estate empire, linked to illegal human experimentation. My father's company's stock crashed. Alex's company faced multiple federal investigations. The Alpine Institute was raided by Swiss authorities, and Dr. Klein and several senior staff members were arrested. I watched it all happen from a quiet suite at the Four Seasons. I had left the estate right after my toast. "You have another interview request," my attorney said, placing her phone on the table. "This time, it's 60 minutes. "Decline," I said, looking out at the city skyline. "Maya has the exclusive rights to my testimony." "The district attorney wants to meet again tomorrow," she added. "Your statement is central to the case." I nodded. The evidence I had provided had opened investigations into 13 suspicious deaths at the Institute, including Sarah's. We had discovered that we weren't the only victims. Wealthy families from all over the world had quietly sent their difficult children to be adjusted. A knock at the door interrupted us. My attorney checked the security monitor. "It's Alex Ryder," she said, raising an eyebrow. Again. He had been trying to see me since the wedding. I had refused every time. "Let him in," I said, surprising both of us. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Alex looked nothing like the man from the wedding. He was unshaven and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He wore jeans and a rumpled shirt. He stopped a few feet away from me, respecting the invisible boundary I had put up. "The FBI interviewed me for 8 hours yesterday," he said quietly. "I told them everything. About your father's blackmail, about the Institute, everything I knew." "To save yourself?" I asked, my voice even. "No," he said, meeting my eyes. "To try and do one thing right in this whole mess. I know it's too late." I nodded toward the door, and my attorney stepped out, leaving us alone. I asked the question that had been haunting me since Paris. "Was any of it real? Us?" Alex's expression crumbled. "All of it," he said. "Meeting you at the Guggenheim, that wasn't planned. Falling in love with you wasn't part of any strategy. When your father found out we were serious, he panicked." He went on. "He said you were unstable, dangerous. He showed me fake medical records. He made it all sound so convincing." "And you believed him," I said quietly. "I believed someone who lied without blinking," Alex replied, his face full of pain. "Someone who threatened everything I thought I was supposed to protect. I built all of this," he said, his voice cracking. "And I will regret that choice every single day for the rest of my life." I turned back to the window, not trusting myself to speak, not wanting him to see how deeply his words affected me. He continued more quietly. "The wedding to Chloe, it was a business arrangement. After you escaped, I tried to find you. Your father thought going forward with the merger and the marriage would bring you out of hiding. He was right about that, at least." We fell silent. Outside, the city went on, completely indifferent to our personal drama. Finally, I asked, "What will you do now?" He paused. "I'll cooperate with the authorities. I'll testify against your father." After that, he shrugged. "I don't really know. The company's future is uncertain. And Chloe, she filed for an annulment the morning after the wedding. Last I heard, she's in Bali with her publicist, trying to create a story where she's the victim. I almost smiled. Chloe always was good at reinventing herself. 3 months later, I stood in front of the building that had once been the Alpine Institute. Now it was surrounded by police tape and signs that said evidence and no entry. The sharp mountain air still had a trace of that sterile, antiseptic smell that had haunted my dreams. But standing there, no longer a prisoner but a free woman, watching them take apart the place that had once held me, I felt something inside me begin to change. Maya Desai walked toward me, her voice recorder in her hand. "Are you ready for the last interview?" she asked. I nodded. Her series on the Institute had won international awards and had helped start investigations into other facilities around the world. More than that, it had brought me into contact with other survivors, people who, like me, had thought they were alone. "As soon as we're done here, I'm flying to Geneva," I told her as we walked around the perimeter. "I'll be meeting with the United Nations Human Rights Commission. The Survivors Coalition has secured a formal hearing." The new Dawn Foundation had been created from the settlement I received from Alex's company, which he had signed over to me before stepping down. We use the money to open safe houses, offer legal aid, and challenge the kind of unregulated therapeutic programs that had once thrived in secret. And we were just getting started. "We've already identified 17 more facilities using similar methods," I said quietly. "The work is only beginning." That evening, I went to a quiet cemetery overlooking Lake Geneva. Sarah's grave was near the edge, where the trees met the water. I placed a handful of white lilies on the stone, letting my fingers rest there for a moment. "Sarah," I whispered, "we did it. They can't hurt anyone else now." My phone buzzed. It was a message from Alex. "Committee approved the funding for the Survivor Rehabilitation Center. Construction begins next month. No strings attached." He had been working nonstop, testifying against my father, using his tech skills to find hidden evidence, and putting his remaining money into the foundation. He always said he wasn't doing it for forgiveness. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. As I turned to leave, a young woman approached me slowly. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Maya?" There was something in her expression, something haunted that I recognized. I had seen it in the mirror. I had seen it in others. She was one of us. "Yes," I answered gently. "And who are you?" She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone who needs help. I saw your interview. What they did to you, they did to me too. It was a different place, but the same methods." I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were trembling, but she didn't pull away. "Then you've come to the right person," I said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe." We walked away from the Institute together, side by side. I looked up at the fading light in the sky, thinking about the path that had brought me here. They had tried to break me, to reshape me into someone quiet and obedient. But instead, they had created something else. They had forged a woman strong enough not just to survive, but to protect others from ever going through what she had. Not a victim, but a force for change. Not broken, but transformed.